What's up, guys? Welcome back to Simply Minis. If you're new here, my name's Johnny. This is my CRF110. We have some cool BBR parts that we're going to be slapping on this thing today. We've got a set of fork springs and a shock spring. Brad over at BBR, he's been sending us some stuff. He already sent us these bars. Today we got these things. Let's grab the tools and let's get at it. So shout out to Brad. Man, I just I get there and I'm just blanking out. It's like I'm right there, and then it's just like, yeah. All right, first order of business here is going to be the fork springs. Pop these things open, take a look at them. So we have some, looks like preload spacers. I'm assuming those are optional, but we'll take a look at things as we get moving. Got a little instruction sheet here. This tells you your fork oil levels. Kind of gives you some basic instructions. You'll see that these forks are actually pretty easy to work on once we get moving. Of course, some stickers. And your springs. Not a whole lot to show here. They're just good old springs. And next up will be the shock spring. Pretty self-explanatory. Cool little air bubble. Wrapped up nicely is your heavy-duty shock spring. Now you'll notice that one side is actually smaller than the other, so we will have to figure out which way that goes. All right, first things first here, slack up your cable. So you're gonna have to pop your brake out. You just pull it all the way out like that. You have 2 8s behind your number plate here. I already have these out. I have mine number plate zip tied like this, so I just flip it up out of the way, nice and easy. All right, next up we're gonna pop the wheel off. We got a 14 and a 19. All right, got the wheel out. Put that off to the side. Now we're gonna pop our brake cable off. All right, and we will loosen up fork legs. We have a couple 12mm bolts for your upper and your lower. All right, before I take this all the way out, just gonna put a little bit of tension back on here. I'm gonna crack this top nut loose. 17 it is. Like I said, just crack that loose, a couple turns. That way you won't have to try to hold it with your bare hands and crack it loose on the bench. Embarrass yourself. All right, there's one tube. Now let's do the other. All right. We have 2 fork tubes out, ready to be stripped down and have some heavy-duty springs installed. All right, so we're in the back on the workbench here. We've already got these things cracked loose, so we're just gonna take them out the rest of the way. Now, with these forks being pretty much brand new, I don't really need to do any maintenance on them. Some guys, they'll be needing to replace their fork seals and the dust caps, probably due for an oil change. In my case, this thing's only got maybe 2 to 3 hours on it total. So with that being said, I'm basically just going to be doing a drain and fill of the oil. So here we have CRF preload spacer. Just going to set that there. Get my oil bin ready. I'm going to slowly compress this. Alright, now we are going to dump this over and try to catch the spring before it slides out and makes a big old mess. So that oil's still pretty clear. Oh, what do we got? Looks like we have a small little washer. Goes on top of the spring. Don't lose that. And here is your stock spring. Pull it out slow. Let your oil come out. Alright, we'll call that good. So, we'll do a little comparison of the stock spring and the BBR heavy duty spring. As you can see, there's a pretty big difference between the two. Now with the heavy duty spring, it looks like you'll be eliminating that preload spacer, because obviously this thing is pretty long. You can see the thickness in the coil. That alone will make this thing much heavier. Springs like this will definitely help out, prevent from bottoming out. Alright, so we are at the point now where I'm going to be pulling the damping rod out of the bottom of the fork here. So you want to stick your spring in there just to put a little bit of tension on it. Keep it from spinning. See, I've got my finger in the end here, just compressing the spring a tiny little bit. Get your 6mm Allen. It helps if it's on an impact, it just gets the job done quicker. Mine was already pretty loose. Go me. Pull out your bolt. Pull your spring back out. You should be able to dump that rod right on out. You also have your rebound spring. Alright, here's a comparison for the BBR rod versus your stock rod. We'll be needing to swap this little bushing here off the stock rod onto the BBR rod. It's pretty simple. There's just a little slit in there. Just open that up. Kind of like a piston ring if you've ever done those. You can set your stock rod off to the side. Pop this guy on there. Now if you're coming completely apart to replace your seals and whatnot, just keep in mind that there is a cone here, goes into the bottom of the fork. Make sure that stays there. So we're all back together there. Slide our rod in, damping spring, or the rebound spring, sorry. Got our bushing on here. Slide that all the way down. Make sure it seats. Now just like when you came apart, just want to put a little bit of pressure on the spring so you can tighten up the bolt on the bottom. Like I mentioned before, it's much easier with an impact. You can just kind of buzz it together. So, good and snug there.
your spring back out, because now you're going to dump your oil in. Now with these rods, even the springs too, if you buy them separate, I recommend buying them together. With them, you get this card. It gives you kind of a guideline to where you should be with your oil heights and what weight you might want to run. Now you can adjust this to whatever your preference is, but BBR is nice enough to give you this as just a reference starting point. Ready to go, putting some oil in these forks, or this fork. I have my dipstick set to 5.5 inches. No, you don't have to use anything fancy like this. You can use a piece of paper, pretty much any long item that you have. You can use a freaking chopstick if you wanted to. Just measure it out to the length that you need. My oil, I'm using 20 weight. Again, I'm a bigger guy, so if you're a lighter rider, you may want to use something lighter. So to start, we're going to dump in a whole bunch. Alright, we're right at the bottom of that dipstick there. We'll call that good. Alright. Slide our spring in there. Pull this thing up. We'll get our fork cap back on. You should be able to do these by hand. At least get them started. You want to just tighten them up, snug them up with a wrench. Double check your bottom bolt. There you have it. Side by side, you can see the difference in length here. Obviously the right leg being the BBR damping rod and heavy duty spring, and the left side being stock. So you'll gain that little bit of height for travel. About an inch, inch and a quarter maybe. Alright, the other fork is the exact same thing as what we just showed you, so we're just going to do a little time lapse on this one. And for my next trick, I'm going to put this thing together really fast. Alright, so we buttoned up the forks in the front. Now we're going to move on to the shock in the back. You can't really see it because of the battery box and all this fun stuff is in the way. But I've already pulled the plastics off. That's the easy part. You have a 14 and a 17 on the top here, just below the gas tank. And then, for your bottom bolt on the swing arm, it'll be another 14 and a 17. And then
hopefully you should be able to wiggle this thing out. So let's get to it. And just like that, shock is out. Pretty easy. So you notice, of course, my bike is pretty new, so it's not too bad of an idea to just swap a spring onto this thing. Now, if this bike was old and been beaten into the dirt for years and these bushings were worn out, it might not really be worth it to throw a spring on, maybe just buy a new shock altogether. So with all that being done, let's take this thing apart. All right, so to start, we're going to compress the stock spring. The stock spring's pretty weak, so you can probably do it by hand.
Oh man!
Did I really get you?
Shit out of my finger. Yeah.
Did I get you good?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's just part of the fun. That's a really good groove in there.
Listen.
Jesus. All right. So took a little bit of fighting, but we got the circlip out of this groove down here. It definitely helps to have a friend. One that preferably won't stab you with a pick. I almost lost a finger today, but it's all right. We're still buddies. All right, so we got this all loosened up here. Now, Honda was just so smart that they didn't allow you to slide the spring and the retainer and everything over this eyelet here. They want you to take apart this end of the shock. Slide that out of the way there, slide that out of the way. You need to crack this guy loose from the eyelet. Now, one thing to pay attention to is if you have any threads showing here, you want to try to match that when you go back together, because you could theoretically change the length of your shock. So, if you threaded that thing all the way in, your shock would be just a hair shorter. Might not be a huge difference at the end of the day, but some people like being pretty precise about that stuff. We will take our adjustable wrench here.
So for some reason we lost our audio here, so I'm just gonna edit in voiceover for the rest of the video. So now at this point you have the collar loose and you're gonna need to remove the eyelet. We chose to use a punch while holding the collar with the crescent wrench to loosen the eyelet. The only problem we found with this is that the collar gets so tight when you force it in the other direction to pull the eyelet off, because it's all thread locked. It makes it kind of tough to get this collar off. So in order to crack that bottom locking collar loose, we double nutted it, which is just tightening two nuts against each other on the shaft. And then you have something to hold on to keep the shaft from spinning so that you can crack that locking collar loose. It just butted up really tight against the bottom of the shaft there when we pulled off the eyelet, so we had to find a way to jolt it loose. So you have the spring retainer washer, the spring alignment bushing, and then the spring itself comes off. That last bushing on the shock is the shock bump stop that does not need to be removed. So now you'll get your new spring out. Toss that spring right on. Small side goes towards the bottom. Put back in your spring alignment bushing. And the retainer washer. And here's that pesky locking collar. Don't forget that was a couple of threads back when we took it off. So try and set it as close as you can remember, or you can mark it with a marker when you take it apart. It had thread locker on it before, so we're going to put it back on. Thread your eyelet on. Now you're going to want to tighten all this back together. So obviously this spring is a lot thicker and tougher. You will not be able to compress it with your hands. If you don't have a press, you're going to have to get creative. Fortunately, we do have a press, so we're going to show you how we're going to do this in the press. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways to do this without having something to compress it.
All right. So as you can see, we don't have our snap ring fully seated yet. Our groove is all the way down here. So we are going to use the press to compress the spring in order to allow us to get that ring in there. So with that being said, we'll get this thing lined up here.